And I need this. Welcome to the Recovered Republican. My name is Brianna, and today I have Tabitha Zeigler today. She is a podcaster. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me. How are you?
Sure. I'm good.
So tell me a little bit about your podcast. What's it called? What made you start it?
Well, it's called Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America. And basically I started because I have 3 little kids that got diagnosed with autism. And then later on down the line, I found out that I was a late diagnosed, high masking autistic female. I know that's a mouthful.
Yeah. What did that journey look like for you?
Well, I don't think anybody ever really expects to have a kid with autism because it's not something that you can see. So, like if you have a child that there's a disability that's like readily identifiable, I think maybe it's hard at the beginning, but it gets easier faster. And when you can't see it and you don't really know what's going on, it's kind of hard all the way through.
Yeah. Did it help to get yourself diagnosed? Did it make you feel like it put some puzzle pieces together?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, if all of your children are diagnosed with autism, and then, like I'm a single mom too. So I'm pretty much all of the things. And whenever you are actually like looking at your children and you're like, I'm pretty sure I used to do that. And you're just ticking away through the boxes. And then after a while, you're like, you know what? Maybe it wouldn't just be good for myself, but maybe it would also be good for others. Like if in fact I test for this, I'm already being an advocate more of like from the parent perspective for the children, but then I can also be an advocate for the adults.
Amazing. So if somebody is looking to get diagnosed with autism as an adult, what does that process look like?
It's a cluster.
I know. It's a hard question to answer.
No, I started asking my kid's doctor, and I was like, listen, this is something that I'm curious about. And then I'm involved with a lot of other like autism organizations. And I think once you kind of get fed into that network, and if you are vulnerable enough, then you just start asking questions. So I started asking questions to people that I trusted. And along the way, somebody was like, oh, I think I know a guy. So that's how I found the psychologist that I went to go through like the battery of tests with.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty extensive.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not something that you're like, right, let me just answer this, 10 question quiz and then boom, you have autism.
No, I'm a speech language pathologist by trade. So for kids, the way it looks, it's about a 4-hour evaluation if it's done correctly through the ADOS and a bunch of other tests. Is it the same for adults? Do they use the ADOS or are they using something else?
I do not remember the exact name of the test that they gave me, but I do know that I had 3 or 4 different written tests, and then I also had to sit down. So there was one test in particular that he basically was like, listen, so normally people that are testing at 5 and under don't have autism, and 5 and up generally do.
Okay.
So that was sort of the entryway into the conversation after I had, say, like the 4-hour sit down with him and all of the rest. And he was like, yeah, so, and I said, right, so what was my number? He's like an 8. I was like, 8 out of 10, so I'm like super autistic then.
Hey, I mean,
yeah,
what's wrong with that?
And he was kind of like gobsmacked at first, and then I just laughed it off.
But why is that so surprising to him? Because to me, that makes a lot of sense, because as people who I know who are on the spectrum, they're very blunt. And I'm like, yeah, that would be what I would expect someone on the spectrum to say.
I think it's just more so, once you step into a certain level of advocacy, I think you just rip the Band-Aid off.
Okay.
And I was so far over it by that point because I just tumbled through all these different holes with my kids that by the time it got to myself, I was like, hey, I'm here. Let's just figure it out. And, whatever you say is fine. If I don't test for it, okay. That probably would have been more shocking, honestly. Because when you have 3, and then they always tell you, the likelihood of having another with autism once you have one is greater. So I'm like, if I just keep having kids, they're all probably going to be autistic. So most likely, where did it come from?
Yeah, we know that they say 80% of autism is genetic. Now, that doesn't mean 20% isn't genetic. It just means they haven't identified the gene yet, is what I think, honestly. But this is a good segue into what we're talking about today. Today, we're going to be talking about autism in general, but also we're going to talk about some current events that's going on within autism, and are they good things? Are they bad things? Is there more we should be doing? So let's talk a little bit about, before we get into this, the podcast is always about, you're a Democrat, right? In my podcast is, anyway.
The thing is, right, like I'm from a very red area.
Of course.
I grew up around people that would have considered themselves very Republican.
Oh, yeah.
But very Republican. See, this is the thing they're not aware of, right? Very Republican from the old version of what it meant to be Republican. And I'm gay, so I'm already sort of in the other camp.
Okay.
And then I've got autistic kids. I'm autistic myself. So I think the more you are othered, you just fall into that camp because they wouldn't want you over here even if you wanted to be there.
So do you feel like you're a Democrat by default then?
No, I think I'm a Democrat by choice, but I'm also unhappy with the Democratic Party.
Okay.
If I really probably had a choice, I think I probably would represent more independent, probably also because I'm neurospicy and I don't like to be told what the hell to do.
Yeah.
There's that too. Once you get into more of this gatekeeping with all of the parties, immediately I'm like, right,
this is still wrong.
Who are you serving? Who is serving the people? And I'm always for the people.
Yeah.
I'm that sort of person.
I am my podcast is a lot about getting everyday people involved, getting everyday people out there and change the things that they don't like in the party.
Right.
So I am happy to hear you, because I don't think that it's ever good for a party to be like, we're perfect and we don't need to change anything, because that's just set up for failure, in my opinion.
Well, that's when abuse happens.
That too.
I mean, and look, we've got a lot of all that going on. And I'm a grown up and I feel like I'm responsible for myself and my children. So by default, then I question things. And that's when critical thinking really clicks in,
Yeah. So did you grow up as a Republican, or did you grow up kind of neutral? What was your upbringing like?
I think my parents have changed quite a bit.
Okay.
I was born in 1983.
Okay.
So I remember when George Bush the first was in office. I was small, but I do remember it. I remember people talking about how hard life was then. And nobody at that time when I was young was ever like, oh, hey, you're a horrible person if you're a Democrat, or you're a horrible person if you're a Republican. I would say everybody was probably more conservative leaning because there was a church on every corner. And early on, I noticed that there was a strong correlation between religion and the Republican Party for whatever reason. And I've just noticed as time has gone on, that has just really gotten very strong.
Do you think that there still are reasonable Republicans, or is it just the MAGAs? Is the Republican Party just doomed? This is just your opinion. I'm just curious what you think.
I think more normal people, because of all of the trauma that they're seeing, it is clicking something internally. I'm not saying everybody, but I think more people that would have identified primarily as I'm a diehard Republican, nobody's ever going to change my mind. Now those wheels are turning because they're looking at their family members and they're like, I've got a daughter, I've got a mom, I've got a neighbor that has autism. I work in a school where there are kids with disabilities. And as things are rolling out and they're seeing different people that they love have things taken away from them, I think it's harder to fall in line.
That's fair. So, but let's bring it back to autism. I want to just start with going over what autism is. I know you know, but not everybody knows who's watching. So I want to just go through what the Mayo Clinic says what it is. Autism is autism spectrum disorder is a condition related to brain development that affects how people see others and socialize with them. And that is the entire definition. Would you agree with that definition, or do you think that there's more to it?
Well, there's always more to it because that's why they call it a spectrum, right? Autism spectrum disorder. And I think that's really great that they changed that, because then there's less of a hierarchy internally, and
Oh, yeah.
and you can really see people as part of the group.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the levels a little bit. So they've changed the way they've classified the different levels. We used to have mild, moderate, high functioning, and Asperger's. We no
Right.
longer do it that way because Dr. Asperger is a Nazi sympathizer,
Right.
and the experiments he was doing weren't very ethical. And so while that was used for a while, after people learned the history, they decided it wasn't something they wanted to be associated with. So we switched it to 3 levels. The first level is requiring support. Individuals may have difficulty initiating social interactions, may exhibit inflexible behaviors that interferes with functioning in one or more contexts. These are the people that I think, for me, are the ones that people often say, well, you don't seem autistic.
Mm-hmm.
I would think that these are the people who are going to be high masking. Oftentimes they have high levels of anxiety,
Yes.
depression, because oftentimes they're not diagnosed either.
Right.
Is this where you fall?
I would say so.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's really important to say, like, at the time when I was growing up, when I was young and you were in school, if it wasn't very apparent that you had a disability, you were lazy.
Mhm.
You weren't applying yourself or something else. I think there was probably a wide range of people, because I went to a very small school, but I still think within that group, there was a very wide range of disabilities, like people with dyslexia and things of that nature, that, people would target them as being lazy. And then maybe eventually they would kind of take that role because they're like, right, why am I trying? But in reality, I would bet like 9 out of 10, they had a disability. And if they had been given the tools required to compete well, their whole school experience would have changed for them.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. As somebody who I was born in 88. And so now that I'm a speech language pathologist, I understand why I started struggling when I did, because I had ADHD that was undiagnosed. I had dyslexia that was undiagnosed. They tried to diagnose it. Back then, even in the 90s, our testing was all based on males and male data and only white male data.
Right.
And so the way I was presenting was not like a white male, but it definitely is how somebody who is a female with dyslexia and inattentive ADHD acts. But because of that, it's like when you stopped learning to read and reading to learn around 3rd and 4th grade is when I started to struggle.
Sure.
And so we went through all the testing. All that they could come up with is that some sort of undetermined learning disability, and the supports my mom didn't feel like would help. So she didn't take the supports.
Okay.
And so instead I kind of struggled for a really long time. And then eventually I kind of figured it out, did hooked on phonics, which does work. And then went to high school and it was good. But I just wonder if I had had the supports I needed, how much further I would be in life. Because I'm like, looking at my life, I'm like, I feel like if I would have had those supports, maybe I could have gone to medical school and been a doctor.
Sure.
But because I didn't have those supports growing up, I didn't think it was possible. And that sucks. Like, because like to grow up thinking you're done, but it's like, no, you just need supports. Why is that hard for people, do you think?
Well, just the fact that we're women, right? Like from birth, we're essentially, especially in places like this, especially in very religious communities, you have an expectation. And that expectation is to be quiet and small. And if you don't fit that, and it's hard for you to fit that, you spend the majority of your time trying to fit yourself into this box that you don't belong in. And I think that's basically my story. I don't necessarily think that my family, that they were trying really hard to make me like really small and really fit that box. I think they're probably a little bit more open-minded than some. But yeah, ultimately, it's like, well, you're a girl and this is what it means to be a girl. And at some point then, they are preparing you to be a wife and a mother and a caretaker and all of these things. And, if you don't fall in line at some point, it may not just be your family. It might be, the kids at school, your teachers at school, and it's just every ring of that. I mean, I would say, looking back and knowing what I do now, I was a ball of anxiety.
Oh yeah.
I was like so high strung and I was a perfectionist. And I think it's because I was masking and I didn't even know what that was. I didn't have a word for it, right? But when you walk into a room and you've now observed all the adults around you and you watch how they behave and you're trying to figure out where you fit in, girls are really smart.
Mm-hmm.
That's why boys, it's really easy, especially, if you're only going to focus on white males, right?
Of course.
It's really easy for them to be like, right, well, here's this template and this is what they do. And now everybody else has to fit into this box. And now they're finding out, wow, there's like 25 boxes and, we can't fit all these kids into all of these 25 boxes.
No, it's such a wide spectrum. And I think that this is a good time to bring up why representation is important.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had that representation of kids, of like what it looks like to be a girl with ADHD or what it looks like to be a girl with autism,
mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have felt other. I think that that's what I hear the most from people who were late diagnosed as neurospicy or neurodivergent,
mm-hmm.
is that they felt different in school and they didn't know why. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I felt that for sure. And it was just like, the way I coped and the way I masked is that everybody who knows me, I knows I'm a talker. I talk a lot. I mm-hmm. just do. Mm-hmm. And in school, the way that I was masking is I just wouldn't talk. Mm. It's like, if you talk to me, I would talk to you and things like that, and teachers, but like, I would never talk in class. I was very well behaved. I just like tried to be as small and I didn't want people to like perceive me. Like I didn't want to get up in front of the class. because I was afraid that I was going to do something that I would embarrass myself that wasn't normal. Mm. You know what I'm saying?
I think I sort of went the opposite way.
Okay.
I must be an expert, right? Because if I can control my environment, then I can control people's response to that. So then I ended up doing all of the things. Was, in several different sports, in high school, I was in choir. I sang in competitions. I did, volleyball, basketball, and tennis.
I was overly involved. I mean, I was too, yes. But it just in arts, like my hyper fixation, if you will, was music. And I have a music degree in undergraduate for singing. And so I did a lot of performing starting in third grade. And it was like, that was my thing. That was where I felt more comfortable. And so I did that and dance and like I did speech team and all of these things. And I was overly involved in acting and stuff like that. But like outside of that, everybody in acting is neurospicy. They just are. And it's just like, so those were my people. But outside of that, I was just like, not like everybody else kind of a thing, I guess.
Looking back, I was trying to think about this the other day because my kids don't have a lot of friends. I'm working on that because, they have things that people can tell right away. And, I grew up on a farm in a very rural community. My brother was my friend, like that's kind of how it was back then. Your siblings were your friends. And then when you went to school, then you made some more friends and then maybe they might come and play at your house or you'd ride your bike all the way in town and go play with kids and come home. But I was alone a lot. And I don't think I shared really what I thought with very many people. And if it wasn't for music related things, I don't know if I would have survived high school. Like that was my outlet. Mm-hmm. Like I was that kid that I would sit in my room. I'd be listening to whatever music, because back then, right, we're going to buy CDs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll never forget like the first actual like cassette tape. Because if you want to go way back, there was an older girl that was our dads worked together. Mm-hmm. She came to the house with a Debrat tape.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, what's this?
Yeah.
So just each time something like a different genre was introduced, I was game. I was just like, ooh, what's this? And what are they talking about? And, pre going on to, any website that provides the lyrics, I would sit down, I'd write the lyrics out for myself. so that I could understand exactly what they were talking about.
Hmm.
So early on, I was really big into, writing my own poetry, trying to compose my own music. I always had high aspirations of, learning more instruments.
Mhm.
Vocal was my instrument. And but then you roll into the whole like multi-potentialite thing, which I think is a very neurospicy thing as well.
Yeah, we have so many interests, and it's like we can master so many things so easily. Yeah. But let's go back to the levels. So level 2 is now considered like moderate autism. It's considered requiring substantial support. Individuals have more pronounced difficulties in social communication and may exhibit significant impairments in functioning, requiring substantial substantial support. So these kiddos, I think it's when it becomes obvious is when we get into the level 2. We might see hand flapping, spinning, stimming out of the corner of the eye. I'm trying to think adults wise. I think these people are just more obviously struggle with social interactions is what it looks like, because as we get older, people learn to mask better, and they just do. It's just part of it. And I think that, some people still need to wear certain clothes, and they might have more sensory issues. They might be a more picky eater is one that I still notice with adults who are neurospicy, is that they'll have a limited food inventory.
Yeah.
What do you think of when you think of level 2s?
I think routine.
Yeah.
I think routine is big for anybody on the spectrum. But it seems like the farther you get into the levels, routine becomes very, very important. And it could be something as simple as safe foods, right? Like maybe at level 2, maybe you've got like 20 safe foods. And then by the time you go to level 3, you've got like 2 or 3.
Yeah. Usually it's under 5.
Right.
Yeah. So these kids need a lot more support. These kids may interact inappropriately in social situations. So they may not talk to people. They may not greet you appropriately. It can look like meltdowns. It can also look like shrieking with joy is another one I see a lot. Again, stimming can look like so many different things. There's no like set of stems, like anything that feels good in their body can be a stem. It just depends on the person. So their interests are more focused in this level a lot of times. Some special interests, they may have stronger special interests such as ceiling fans, trains, horses, balls, anything. It can be anything. Again, like people think that a special interest for autism has to be trains, or it has to be electricity, or has to be something, but it really doesn't. It can be anything. And I bring up horses because I think there were so many young girls who were on the spectrum who got missed, who had a special interest in horses that nobody saw. And if you had a special interest in horses, maybe you want to look into autism or ADHD, but
horses were my thing. I begged my dad for a horse.
See,
I was drawing horses. Yeah, there was something about the horses that, and dogs too.
Yeah.
And we had German Shepherds.
Yep.
And I would go out to the lot and I would talk to them like they were my therapists.
Oh,
I was that kid.
I loved dogs.
And I wanted to be a vet too, like early on, early childhood dream, because like I could relate to the animals. It was very clearly unconditional love.
Yeah.
Like you could feel it. And I think for a kid on the spectrum, I notice a lot of that. So, anytime that you get into any sort of therapies or like, where they bring the mini zoo to school, my kids love that stuff.
That's so great.
Yeah, but in little ways like that, that's how I noticed, right? Because I was like, oh, right, like I did that. I liked that, all those sort of things.
Oh, yeah. And it's so funny and one of the reasons I wanted to do this breakdown is because I work with so many kids on the spectrum. And one of the things I was like noticing as I'm working with these, because I work in first step, so it's under 3 years old, all of them. And I go into the home. And so it's already a little intrusive. I'm going into their home, their space. Kids are already stranger dangery. But what I've noticed is kids on the spectrum love me. Yeah. Like, even if I'm not working, like if I'm in a daycare, just because I'm very positive and kind and patient and just like giving them the space. I'm coming into their world. When you're trying to interact with a kid who has autism, it's always about expanding on what they're already doing. It's not about trying to bring them into your world. You've got to go into theirs.
Yes.
And so if you want to connect, and I'm telling people this because I want people to try to connect with kids on the spectrum more, just sit on the floor with them, see what they're doing, and see if you can join them. And just like, you know, if they're playing trains, it's like, ooh, the train's going to go through the tunnel or knock down the blocks or something fun like that, because they will respond better to that.
Yeah, but don't knock their blocks down right away.
Oh, no. You build a separate tower.
Yeah.
Don't knock their blocks. You build a separate tower that they did not build, and then knock that down with a truck they are not necessarily playing with.
Yeah, parallel play.
Parallel play is very important. So if you sit down with them, they have a train, you get a train, you're playing with them, kind of mirroring what they're doing at first. And sometimes they will join you, which is the goal. But yeah, like they love that. And if they really love you, they will put their feet on you. just a fun fact. But level 3 is the most significant level. This is considered requiring very substantial support. Individuals exhibit severe deficits in verbal and nonverbal social communication skills, causing significant impairments in functioning and requiring substantial support. These kiddos sometimes are nonverbal and use AAC devices, which you have some experience with.
Yeah, so I've got a set of twins. One is nonverbal, or I prefer non-speaking actually, because sometimes nonverbal, I feel like it insinuates to people that they're not intelligent, which is not the case.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I still feel like non-speaking does the same thing. And we need a new term.
Yeah, maybe. I saw a movie on it though, and it was really interesting. And of course now I can't remember the exact name, but anyway.
Maybe limited verbal speaking ability,
maybe. But look, at the end of the day, it's like you can tell that these kids are still intelligent.
Oh yeah.
And the AAC device is supposed to be an aid, you know, and it's just an additional like tool in their toolkit, if you will.
Absolutely. So a little bit more education. So for those people watching, the reason we use baby sign, AAC, all of these things, it's not just to replace their ability to speak. It is to supplement. Because when we say a child is nonverbal or non-speaking, it doesn't mean that they have 0 words. It just means they don't have enough words to effectively communicate their wants and needs verbally. So we use an AAC device, and that can be something as simple as baby signs, like sign language, or pictures. But the most common one that people realize is like a tablet. So what it looks like is it kind of looks like an iPad with a better case. And then they have different pictures. And when you touch the picture, it talks for you and you can make sentences. What the research has found is if we introduce AAC of some kind to children, they are 80% faster at learning language skills than if we do it without any AAC, which is why AAC should never be looked at or looked down upon, in my opinion. When you are dealing with somebody with AAC, you need to talk to them like you would talk to any other person. And they will respond to you with their device. And that is fine. Just because they are using a device does not mean that they have cognitive disabilities. Look at Stephen Hawking's. You know, he had ALS. By the time he passed away, he was unable to talk verbally at all. But he was brilliant. So that's just one example. And I just want people to know, because I think people see kids in wheelchairs and kids who don't look typical and are afraid. And all these kids want is to be interacted with and treated normally. And you can do that. You just go up to them, and it's like based on their age. It's like if they're a 3-year-old using a device, it's like, oh, hi, what's your name? Like, that's appropriate. You can still talk to them like anyone else. And then you can back off if there is a cognitive disability that you were not aware of. I'm sure if there is a caregiver who's there to help as well. Anything else that you would like people to know about level 3s?
Elopement.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
to talk
so
about.
elopement, my little Koa, he's not really that little. Like all my kids are like
Is he a twin or the oldest?
He's a twin.
Okay.
But he's like 90th percentile, but he's my small one of the three. So I'm a little person with giant kids, basically. And that can also be a problem because as these children get older and they look older and they get facial hair or other body hair, what have you, and you can't see, for example, like they have Down syndrome or whatnot, and then they're struggling or they don't communicate the way that you think. When you identify someone that way, your brain doesn't ultimately switch to, oh, this person may have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
You just think, what's wrong with them?
Mm-hmm.
Or, like with police sometimes, you just rush to thinking maybe they're a threat when they're not.
Yeah, because they're acting erratically. They probably think they're on drugs of some kind. Yeah. And we'll come back to that a little bit later on. But one thing that I think is really important is trying to change how people think about when people are acting differently and not to think this person's on drugs. Right. Because me and my husband were on a cruise and I heard somebody talking about somebody who was, to me, very clearly on the spectrum or very clearly had a disability. Mm-hmm. And I heard somebody saying, what's wrong with that person? And I was like, they have a disability. Mm-hmm. And then they were like, they were clearly embarrassed, but I was like, I'm not going to let this go. Yeah. Because it's like, that person deserves respect too, and deserves to be treated like a human being. Mm-hmm. And it's not their fault that they have a disability. So I don't think people should automatically assume that there's something wrong with somebody just because they have a disability.
Well, there's a history with that, right? Like Indiana is a perfect example of it. 1907, we had eugenics laws, so early on in this country, we were putting people on farms, putting people in institutions, taking them out of the mass public so that they weren't seen, or people were hiding these children at home. And little by little, you would have a brave parent here or there, a brave family here or there that might take their child to church or to school or whatever. But I still think that's the minority because people are so afraid either that they're going to be in an unsafe environment with people they don't trust, because especially if your child can't communicate well, or they're not going to be able to communicate things like abuse.
And that's parents' biggest concerns. Yes. So when kids turn 3, the school system takes over. That's what speech therapy services. You go to the school systems or you go to private clinics. Mm-hmm. A lot of parents' concerns is like, they still can't communicate. What if something happens? They can't tell me. And the statistics are that people who are on the spectrum and disabled are much more likely to be assaulted and abused, and because of their communication difficulties. So I think it's a valid concern. How we fix that, AAC, and they should be doing thorough background checks, but there's clearly some things getting missed.
I mean, just starting to have the conversations, right? Like this conversation is so important because you have 2 people in the room that care about the disability community, that have family members that are part of the disability community. And, clearly we have a desire to educate other people, not to make people feel dumb.
No.
But just to be like, listen, you wouldn't make fun of someone that had a heart condition or a stroke, right?
Right.
So for some reason, it's a hard mental leap for people to look at, say, like an 80-year-old grandma that up until this point that she had the stroke and now she has decreased cognitive ability or whatever because of her stroke. They don't see her in the same way as they would see maybe like a 15-year-old autistic boy that has facial hair and looks like a man.
And is melting down in the grocery store.
Right.
Yeah, I think it is important. One thing I wanted to go through is that there's a new study that I found really interesting because I find studies interesting, is that they've recently identified, and these are not the only subtypes, it's just the ones they started identifying, these 4 different subtypes of autism that I think that people will find interesting, and specifically the one that is 37% of the study participants that participated are considered social and behavioral challenges. And this is separate from the levels, but it kind of plays in as well. because these kids are not usually delayed with their milestones. And that is a big change, because before you had to have a developmental disability or a language developmentally like delayed in order to qualify as having autism. But this study is what helped to get rid of that from the DSM, which I think is really interesting. They demonstrate core autism traits of social challenges and repetitive behavior, but they're usually more like subtle. And they're more likely to have ADHD and hyperactivity disorder, OCD or obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety, depression, along with their autism. So again, those people that kind of fell into that high functioning autism kind of a thing. And I think it's just another way of describing the levels, to be completely honest. I just find it extremely interesting they took away the delay part, but I'm glad they did. The other ones are like mixed ASD with developmental delays, meaning that they don't usually have anxiety, depression, or disruptive behaviors. And it's 19% of participants, but they did have delays in walking and talking. They called this mixed because the autism traits in this group were not as consistent as the other groups. Like they were more consistent, like the types of traits they were seeing, except for this group. And then the moderate challenges groups was 34%. And the really interesting thing is these kids also reach their milestones the same time as kids without autism, and they're moderate. So that was 35 or 34% of the participants. And they also demonstrated the core autism behaviors. They just were a little less intense. And then the last group they've identified as broadly affected, which is the smallest group, which is 10%. And again, most extensive extreme challenges. They had the developmental delay, probably the kids that I'm seeing most often in First Steps, because they are the easiest to identify. Very repetitive behaviors, extreme social difficulties, and they are also likely to have co-occurring psychiatric conditions like anxiety, depression, and mood regulation. The thing that strikes me the most interesting about these levels or these groups is that the least and the most impacted in this study were ones with the coexisting psychiatric disorders. What do you think causes that in the severe category? I know what causes it in the mild category, but
I should say I'm not a medical professional, right?
Yes, she's not a medical professional. I'm just asking her opinion because I like to know what people think.
Well, I'll share a little bit about my own family story. So I had a grandmother that way back when was diagnosed with bipolar schizophrenia. I think back then farther, they would have considered manic depressive.
Okay.
And so that tends to run in families that have some degree of disability in this fashion. I wasn't aware of that when all this started, but as you're diving through the different testing, they're asking you for your family history. And of different families that I've talked to, these sorts of things do come up. It's not like, a catch-all. But I think maybe if you are a little bit more predisposed, depression, anxiety, like to have a family history of it. It could, hop a generation.
I wonder if also it's like something to the effect of they were misdiagnosing some of that and it was autism plus something else.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of adults I run into now, especially the late diagnosed ones, whenever we have these types of conversations, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, I'm ADHD because I've got autism and ADHD. And I've got a whole host of other things going on.
Right. Yeah. The fun fact, it's like, if you didn't know, if you mask enough when you're neurospicy, you can give yourself autoimmune disorders. I have 3.
I've heard about that.
Yeah. So I masked so hard that it caused There we go.
But it's like I rolled the dice and maybe I might get a kid with autism, but rather like what serves the good of the whole. Like if I were to have a child with autism, what is available? Like what resources are available so that them and I can have a better quality of life. If I were to get into a car accident and then I was no longer able to walk, what resources are available so that I could live a better life? And I think that's the conversation we should be having so we can broaden it up a bit. And, maybe autism isn't palatable to everybody. Maybe it could just be that thing of like, oh, right, that could happen to me. Like, what are the odds? And I think right now people are still of that mindset that's like, I'm hardworking, nothing's going to happen to me. Like the statistics of me being in an accident, having a kid with autism, having a kid with medical disability or medical complexity, it's so far down the line, like that's not going to happen to me, rather than the conversation of, but what if? Or what is the likelihood of?
But the funny part is that I hear, let's talk about like some statistics that I hear a lot of men talk about a lot, is that they're all afraid of getting falsely accused of SA. It just is a thing that a lot of men are afraid of.
Yeah.
And while it's horrible and they do happen, it is exceedingly rare that it is happening. It is statistically more likely that a man is going to be SA'd himself. Mm-hmm. And it is far, far more likely that they are going to have a child with autism than it is that they will ever be falsely accused of SA. So that's wild to me.
Well, I try and do a really good job because I'm around a lot of like tough men. Mm-hmm. Because I'm in this pot, if you will. I always try to find ways that I can reach people. And I try and give them ownership where I'm like, listen, maybe you don't do that. Maybe the guys don't do that. But how could you help that? Like, if you have a daughter, if you love your daughter, and you're going to say, I'd pick the bear, right?
Yeah.
And you raise your daughter to, take self-defense classes, use a firearm and all that. Why not go another step in to protect your daughter and the girls in your neighborhood or whatever and be like, listen, I'm going to be an example and I'm going to start to talk about this is what it means to be a man. This is what's acceptable. This is what is not, so that we can bring more men into the conversation to be our allies, if you will. Because at the end of the day, the men are only going to listen to the men. The more and more that the women are like, hey, we think XYZ, they're not really listening. They need to hear it from another man. And they especially need to hear it from another man that's a big jock type dude that's going to be like, hey, this isn't cool. Like, maybe they did this way back when.
I've got to do something really fast. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Live streaming is always so... Okay, thank you. I will try again. It's like you're still on, so we got to make sure you're a human.
No problem. But you know what I mean? It's like everybody wants to talk about the male loneliness epidemic and all this stuff, but nobody wants to take ownership over it, right? And then you have these, asshats sitting in their basements of their parents' basements, rattling on about what they think it means to be a man and how they should put women back in their place and all this sort of thing. Why not? Because, we're a little bit more 50-50. Mm-hmm. Women are actually more like 51%. So we're like outnumbering the men. Like, don't you think for a more like beneficial society, working together would be better? It always works better, especially in the farming communities. And because I'm from one, I find this very egregious because it's like all these farming families that have been doing this for a long time, they know damn well that they couldn't do anything without these women. Because the women, they're out there also in the field, picking up rocks. They're not just taking care of the kids and making the lunches or whatever. Like, these guys couldn't do what they're doing if it wasn't for the women, and they know it. So to get them more in the conversation where it's like, right, when you see something or you hear something, now this is also part of your responsibility. Like, don't leave it all up to your daughter or your wife or your auntie or whatever when you can be part of the solution.
Yeah, we need more men that are part of the solution. I think it's just how it is, because unfortunately right now still men are largely in power.
Look, this is a team sport.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. And like, I have 2 sons and a daughter.
Yeah.
So the way that I'm raising them is like, hey, one day I'll be gone. It'll just be you guys. You're a team. You got to look out for one another. Like, even in those small instances in our own families, like just pumping that advocacy in there of like the humanness, right?
Yeah.
And like, hey, like, how do we take care of one another? How do we do better as a whole? And if we don't really start to come together that way and really see the future, there will be no future.
No, there won't. We have to start collectively coming together. Individualism has just been so rampant in America, where people are just, if it doesn't affect me, I don't care. And again, with disabilities,
it affects everybody.
It does. It's just like healthcare. And this is the part that I want people to understand, is that just like healthcare, everybody is going to be disabled probably in their life at some point.
Sure.
Because the older you get, it's like, I have some disabilities. I have an implanted hearing aid. It's like, I'm 37 years old, but I've had it for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how old you are, and it doesn't matter how healthy you are. Mm-hmm. Everyone's going to age, and everyone's going to need healthcare, and everyone's going to need help at some point in their life. So why are you being so hateful to people who need help now just because you don't?
Well, I think that we've lost our way.
Yeah.
And we've been conned. And this is what I believe about the American people. They don't like to be taken for a sucker.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not adhere to a certain political party. So like yanking on this dragon's tail for as long as they are, and these few people at the top that are like, right, smoke and mirrors, give us all your money. Like, everybody is encountering something that is distasteful to them. Like, I had to argue with the insurance company because my older child got diagnosed with ADHD. So now we started medication. Mm-hmm. We had started one, then we were going to transition to another one so that it would be more effective.
Right.
They wouldn't approve it. So I'm jumping through all these hoops. We have to try like 3 different medications to get the one that we need.
Because it's the expensive one. I know which one it is.
Meanwhile, though, I will barely go to the doctor for myself because I put myself last. I put my kids first. And when you think about all these things that play into like just the insurance arena, right? Why are we putting money hand over fist that we can't even really use the product, but we have to have it just in case, when some guy's sitting on a beach somewhere just like laughing at us?
Yeah, we're being conned. We're being taken advantage of. And there are so many people in the United States who really need to wake up and see that it is not the person that lives next door to you that is the problem. It is not the person who is struggling to pay their rent. It is the people who are buying private islands and yachts and things because they aren't paying their workers a living wage.
Well, what I think is hysterical, not like funny haha, but funny ironic, right? Is like, these people would not share a cup of soup with you, but your Black neighbor down the street, your gay neighbor down the street, your neighbor with disabilities would.
Yeah.
Because we're more alike than they are like us. And for some reason, we have just been mass manipulated to think that we should distrust our neighbor. When if, like, I kind of grew up this way, that's like, hey, we're a cup of sugar sort of people. Mm-hmm. And I do think Hoosiers are primarily like that. Like, most people will pull over at the side of the road if they see someone stuck, at least say, hey, do you have a phone? Like, have you called the police already? I do think most Hoosiers are like that. I think it's a smaller percentage of people that are like, oh, that person's Black, or that person's Latino, or that person's gay, which they may not be able to tell even, right? Or that person's in a wheelchair. I don't think that's us.
Yeah, I hope not. I'm trying to encourage people not to be like that. there are people like that here.
But look, that's
unfortunately.
part of what this conversation is about, right? Like bring it to them. I think we're bring it to the mat sort of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we pride ourselves, like not just Hoosiers, but Americans. We pride ourselves on those types of things. Like this whole roughneck mentality actually was born out of social programs. Like going through all of that hard stuff to then organize for a common good to help our neighbors. Like that's an American thing.
Yeah. And that's a really cool thing. I do hope we can get back to it. I hope we can survive this administration and get back to some normalcy sooner rather than later. We'll see if Congress does their job or not. But I think this is a good time to wrap it up. But I want you to tell people where they can find you and find your podcast.
Well, you can pretty much find me, Tabitha Zeigler, anywhere on all the socials. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. What did I mention? I think I hit it all.
That's everything.
Yeah, just Google Tabitha Zeigler or Staring Down the Storm, Autism Advocacy in America.
Awesome. Well, go and check her out. She has podcasts every week, right?
Yeah, we actually just dropped one today. So every Friday.
Every Friday. So go check it out. If you want to learn more about autism, it's a great place to learn more. And again, it's educational. It's not meant to make anyone feel like they are less than or dumb because people just don't know. So go check it out. Everybody needs to learn more about autism, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I thank you for tuning in and for listening, and I'll see you next time.